Welcome to Lesson 5.4c, Graphing Decimals on a Number Line. Please be sure you have these notes in front of you so that we can begin our lesson. The I can statement for today says, I can graph decimals on a number line. So for your information, just as you graph integers on a number line, you can graph positive and negative fractions and decimals as well. Remember that positive numbers are to the right of 0 on the number line, and negative numbers are to the left of 0 on the number line. So if you want to start graphing decimals on a number line, step 1 is to plan what you want the range of your numbers on the number line to be. So what that means is, if you are given a number line, you want to know what integer or whole number to start at. So for example, in this number line, I may start at -3 and I may end at -2. And this gives us a range to start and to end our number line at. After that, we need to figure out what our increments will be. So when they talk about increments, they're talking about the little tick marks that are placed within the integers or the whole number. Step 2 says to zoom in that section and create your number line. And then step 3 says to graph your numbers. So we can use these 3 steps to graph the following examples. So example 1 says to complete the number line from 0 to 1 with increments of 1/10. Then they want us to graph the following rational numbers. They want us to graph 3/10 and 9/10. So now what I want to do is I want to start with 0 on the far left and then end with 1 on the far right, because we know that 1 is bigger than 0, so it has to be further to the right. Then my problem says to create increments of 1/10. So here's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and we know that 10/10 will make 1 whole. So let's go ahead and rewrite this. This is 1/10, this is 2/10, this is 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. Now let's go ahead and graph our rational numbers. We've got 3/10 right there, which is closer to 0, and we've got 9/10, which is closer to +1. Example 2 says to complete the number line from -2 to -3, so they're giving us our range, with increments of 2/10. So let's graph the following rational numbers of -2 and 2/10 and -2 and 8/10. So I'm going to start with -2 on the far right, because I know that -2 is larger than -3. And in between, I'm going to create increments of 2/10. So here's 2/10, here's 4/10, here's 6/10, here's 8/10, and then 10/10 would make my whole number, or my integer. So let's go ahead and label this. This becomes -2 and 2/10. This becomes -2 and 4/10. This becomes -2 and 6/10, and this becomes -2 and 8/10. Now that I've got my number line created, let's go ahead and graph our rational numbers. -2 and 2/10 is closer to -2, and -2 and 8/10 is closer to -3. So for example 3, they're going to give us a range of -1 to a range of +1. And then we're going to build our number lines with increments of 25 hundredths. All right, so let's go ahead and build our number line first. We know that positive 1 is on this side of the number line, and we know that negative 1 is on the far left of the number line, and we'll place 0 right in the center. So they want us to jump increments of 0.25 spaces. So I know that 0.25, here's 0.25. If I add another 0.25, I'm at 50, or 0.50. If I add another 0.25, I'm at 0.75. And if I add another 0.25, I land on 1, which is my whole number. So this becomes 0.25. This becomes 0.5. And this becomes 0.75. On the left-hand side of 0, we're going to have the same amount of increments, but the only difference now is we're going to label them as negative 0.25, negative 0.5, negative 0.75. So now that we've graphed our number line and set up our increments, let's go ahead and place 0.25 on the number line so we know that it's closer to 0 on the positive side. And let's go ahead and graph negative 75 hundredths, which is on the left-hand side of 0. So notice that negative 75 hundredths is closer to negative 1. So for example 4, they're going to give us a range of 0 to negative 1, and the increments will be 2/10 for each increment. And they want us to graph the following rational numbers. They want us to graph negative 1/5, and they want us to graph negative 3/5. So to do this problem, the first thing that you might want to do is you want to convert your fractions into a decimal. Now if you use in and out, you will know that the fraction form of negative 1/5 is actually negative 0.2. If you're given the fraction form of negative 3/5 and you use in and out, the decimal form of that is negative 0.6. So now that we can do our number line, let's start off with 0 on the far right and negative 1 on the far left. And we're going to jump in increments of 2/10. So here's negative 2/10. Let's jump another negative 2/10, so that will take us to negative 4/10. Jump another 2/10, which would be negative 6/10. Jump another 2/10 would be negative 8/10. So now that I have that, let's go ahead and place our rational numbers on the number line. We know that negative 1/5 is the same as 2/10, so there it goes. And we know that negative 3/5 is the same as negative 0.6. So that's the location of those rational numbers on a number line. So go ahead and complete these got it problems, and then play it back for some feedback. Now that you had some time to work on these problems, let's go ahead and talk about each rational number that you placed on a number line. The answer for number 1, here's the graph. My range is from 0 to 1, and my increments are 2/10 for each tick mark. The answer for number 2, the rational number of negative 3 is placed between the ranges of negative 3 and negative 4, and each increment I jumped was 2/10. Here's the answer for number 3. The range is from negative 2 to negative 3, and I know that negative 2.5 is in between both integers. Here's the answer for number 4. I placed negative 5.6 in between the range of negative 5 and negative 6. And for each increment, I jumped 2/10 each time I moved over on the number line. Here's the answer for number 5. The range for 0.5 and negative 0.5 is positive 1 and negative 1. So the graphing locations go where the red dots are. For problem 6, I converted negative 2/5 into a decimal and I got negative 0.4, and I placed negative 0.4 in between the integers of 0 and negative 1. For each increment, I jumped 0.2 each time I moved along the number line. For the 7th problem, I converted negative 3/10 into a decimal as negative 0.3, which goes between the integers of 0 and negative 1, and each increment I jumped was 1/10 along the number line. So this is the location of negative 0.3 on the number line, which is closest to 0.